It's the history of the Matterhorn bobsleds in silence, though. Let's see. Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so we had chapters 9, 10, 11. I love the idea of managing by walking around anyway. Everybody in our area pretty much does, but chapter 9 especially talks about how Walt does this. I like the story of the grass getting trampled and Walt saying, let's put a sign up for the best picture rather than a fence. When the gardener asked him how we're going to stop these people from trampling the grass, that's a very cool answer to any question. Well, wow, if the people are loving this spot, let's put a picture spot here. That's great. Walt on being happy at Disneyland, he had a great quote. He said, young man, you're on my time now, so you need to be happy. You might be surprised with how that attitude will last after you clock out. And I thought to myself, I'm glad I never got chewed out by Walt, because my gosh, that would have been, I would have probably quit at that point. But he definitely told him that he needs to be happy on the Disney's time, which is all of us are encouraged to do that, obviously. I like that he encouraged the cast to go to the parks and do quality tests, go to the rides, see what the people are liking, all that. We do that anyway, and I like that Disney still gives us 16 opportunities to bring our families in and do that, and we can do it anytime we want, pretty much. So Walt wanted to add 3 new rides. Obviously, one of them you see here is the Matterhorn. He went on a long trip and decided he wanted to include the Matterhorn, the submarines, and the monorail. Roy, as always, didn't think they had the money for it. And so when they kind of came to him with ideas that were considered impossible, Walt's answer to them was, get it done, which I think is funny. I mean, it's definitely, you got to get it done at that point. The lesson in that chapter was become a sponge for ideas, but always remember to try to make the idea better. Chapter 10, Walt was a futurist, and ironically, Mickey Mouse was the first thing ever put on TV, which I didn't know, and that's pretty cool. Walt definitely embraced the medium of TV with the Disneyland show, and even had the idea of synergy before people even knew what that word was. The chapter affirms my belief that Walt would love every innovative ride that has come to Disneyland since its passing, because Rise of the Resistance pushes the boundaries on what a ride is, and I believe he'd love that, because I always like to talk about, hear people say, oh, Rise of the Resistance was make something Walt would roll over in his grave. Well, no, I think he'd love it because it's so innovative. Let's see. The lesson in that chapter was embrace change. Think about that embrace being a loving hug, because it isn't just about accepting change, but using change to better the world and ourselves. Think of change as something that is great and possibly lucrative. Obviously, we're trying to think of change as something that's not just horrible and bad, but great. We're pretty good at that at Disney. We know that change happens with us all the time, but remember that it can be not only a good thing, but also possibly a lucrative thing for yourself as well. Chapter 11 is talking about the Mickey Mouse Club and its great success. And I love that Moose Williams came up with the idea for Mickey Mouse ears. Obviously, we love those in Fantasyland. Visiting kids at recess on the schoolyards was how they did some scouting for the people on the Mickey Mouse Club. Probably can't do that these days at all for lots of reasons. The show was on air for 4 years and was a great chance for Walt to entertain and his favorite thing, educate and entertain at the same time. The True Life Adventure series was a humorous look at nature, and where Walt started, and the reason it was kind of started was Walt's own true life near plane crash in Alaska, where they couldn't find the runway and they were above a cloud cover and it wouldn't go away. The duck footage. Does anybody ever know? As it relates to duck footage, I'm never sure if Walt was trying to get them to tape new footage or if he really believed there was new footage. I kind of thought maybe Walt was trying to get them to tape new footage because he kept saying it like that, but I was never sure about that. So then the lesson for that one was live for the next generation, mentor, and we should, as cast members, I kind of made this for us, mentor every one of our cast members and be a teacher for Fantasyland. All right. The only question I want you guys to answer is whether we thought that the duck footage actually existed or not, because I was never sure if it did. Go back to this. All right. Let's see, Judy, did you think the duck footage actually existed?
I want to say he just wanted to get more footage because everybody that worked for him knew that Walt didn't take no for an answer. So maybe instead of scaring them into thinking like, oh my God, we have to film more footage, he just like, I'm pretty sure I've seen it. So I have complete trust in you guys that you'll find it. And I think that may have been a way to encourage them to, hey, you didn't get all the good footage, maybe, go out there and film some more. So that sounds more plausible to me. But yeah, I feel it was just his way of encouraging them to film additional footage. You want me to go on with
Yeah, you
mine?
can go on and tell us your the rest of about the three.
All right. So for chapter 9, the whole positive outlook and how he told the cast member that the cast member is on his time. It made sense at the time, but just as we mentioned before we started, having my industrial organizational psychology degree now, very different. That would go very different in today's age if a leader were to go to a cast member and tell them that. And just the perspective in how we see our employees has changed as well. Like it's not just about like, well, you applied to work here at Disneyland, you need a paycheck, so you're going to work the way we want you to. That does not work in any organization today. You need to understand what the needs are of our cast members and help them have the same perspective and point of view of what the goal of the organization that they work for is, and have it match, if that makes sense. So if a cast member wants to work for Disney, that means they share the same views of what the mission statement is for Disney, and we'll need to help them understand how to convey that without necessarily telling them, well, you work for the happiest place on earth, so you need to show people how happy you are. Like we have to understand and get to know our cast members today and help them find their own way to display that happiness that we're still selling, that Walt was selling back then. So that's kind of the main thing I got from that chapter. In addition, I wrote down, like, they continue talking about Walt's personality, and he's very much like my grandma used to be. Like, she talked to anybody, like, and in 5 minutes, like, oh my God, did you know those people? No, I just met them 5 minutes ago, but we're best friends now. And she's like, how? That is just some extra human powers that very few people have, and Walt had that. He was just able to talk to anybody, doesn't matter the age. For chapter 10, didn't know either that Mickey Mouse was the very first image on a television, and it's not surprising, but it's refreshing to know that Walt was very much in nostalgia and how he grew up in his upbringing and his small town, but at the same time wasn't afraid of the future. Like every technological advancement, there are, in the history books, you see so many people afraid of it and not want to deal with it, not want to know anything about it. Every time they've been afraid of technology, like, oh, it's just a fad, it's a trend, it'll fade. That happened with movies, and then when they became talkies, and then with television, and people didn't trust the internet. They didn't think that was going to be a big thing. They didn't think cable TV was going to be successful because it was, again, just a fad. That was their way of, I guess, just being afraid without actually saying that change scares me because I don't know how to continue my business with this new form of technology entertainment. Right, that's it for that one. Yeah, I think that's all I have for that one. The biggest thing for me for chapter 11 was Walt wanting all the Musketeers to call him Uncle Walt. but they respected him too much, so they still called him Mr. Disney. And I thought that was so cute and so endearing to hear that he wanted to be that paternal grandfather type or father type to these kids, but they just respected him because, you know, he's Walt Disney, you know, he's technically their boss, though they were too young to understand the boss employee dynamic, but still he was something bigger than just Uncle Walt. He was bigger, you know. So it was very cute, and it's again understandable that Walt not only would consider the future in terms of technological advancement, but also how that's going to work with the next generation, because they haven't mentioned it in the book, but I guess he did have that sense of, I'm not going to be here forever, and I want to make an impact, a lasting impact that's not just going to be Walt Disney, Walt Disney, Walt Disney. And that was his focus on the other generation, on the next generation. And the school, the Cal Arts, you know, he had a role in that. And his whole environmental series, they talked about Carl Walker's daughter and how she became an environmentalist. And I realized, like, I think Walt Disney inadvertently encouraged my environmentalism as well, and why I'm a vegetarian, because every time I anthropomorphize animals and give them human characteristics, it's because of some type of Disney movie where, you know, you have Miko, you have Flick, you have Flounder, you have all these animal sidekicks that have feelings, that emote, and have this love for the main character that, you know, of course, every animal I encounter, I convince myself that they have an awareness of themselves like we do as human beings. So it's interesting to know, like, oh, hey, Walt Disney had a huge impact in almost every aspect of what makes us us. And I thought that's great to me. So
I love what you said about Walt's way of motivating us. Like that cast member wouldn't work for today's generation. I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that that way of motivating, if you know somebody really well, maybe, I mean, it might work then. But other than that, yeah, you have to use a little more, little less, more like a soft glove for approach to people than Walt did back in those days, obviously. Yeah, and his focus on the next generation, man. He's just so far ahead of his time. And sometimes I think this guy must have been a time traveler or something, how far ahead he is. Yeah,
probably.
he's so crazy far ahead. Haley, was the duck footage there, or and he saw it, or did they have to go create it because that's what he wanted them to do?
I think they had to create it because that's what he wanted them to do. Okay. Also, I can hear Walt calling me out for my RBF now. Like, I can hear it all the time. So my biggest takeaway was from chapter 10, when he obviously centered everything about like tomorrow and like how with that comes change. And I know a lot of times when people say like, oh, tomorrow, it's kind of like more of an excuse, where with Walt it was like, oh, like we're actually going to do it tomorrow. And I know, I think I do like change. Maybe that's why I've lived in like 7 different places in the last 4 years. But I know in fantasy, like I feel like every month there's like something that needs to be changed, and we are able to adapt with that. So that really stuck with me. And there's a quote at the end of chapter 10 that I just thought was kind of made me laugh, because, you know, you kind of think of some people at work. There will always be a few poor souls who thrive on doom and gloom, who insist that the end is near. They are to be pitied, but don't let them distract you from your vision for a brighter tomorrow. And that made me laugh. So
I gotta say, I love that quote also. And every one of us can name 10 cast members right now. We all have that. Don't do it, but we could. But yeah, it was good. So Jenna, I think we have 3 people thinking that he wanted them to find the footage, and that's why he said it. What do you think? Was there footage to begin with?
I think it's very possible that he wanted them to get it, so he was using a technique like that. But I also think it's possible for Walt seemed to just picture stuff so well. There's so many stories that they say where like he had everything already in his mind, in Main Street in his mind. He knew, like when they created the map, they were able to make it over a weekend because he knew exactly what it needed to be. I think in his mind's eye, he just saw things so well, it was already there. Like, so I don't necessarily know if the footage actually existed, but in Walt's mind, it was already written in, it was already done. So he just didn't even interpret that they never filmed it because it was already like, he already had the finished product in his mind. So I think for like, as much as he's like, Walt himself says he's not an artist, I definitely think like that's the artist part of him. He just used, his medium was people and, you know, a theme park and seeing what potential was in other people. Like everyone sees art as like, you know, a paint and brush, but for him, I don't think that was his artistry. I think it was in other people. So I really do think he saw the finished product already in his mind. And so for him, it was real, it was done, and he didn't realize it just didn't happen yet. But that's my philosophical version of it. But for Haley, I'm the same. I love change. I'm all about it. I get too bored if I sit still for too long. Of like, if I've learned something new, I go on to something else. A couple months ago, I started doing resin art. This was behind me. And yesterday, I started glass etching because I was already bored of resin and needing to learn something new. You totally get it. Like, I'm the same way. But glazed over when people talk about you either are strong with change or you're not strong with change is the like change itself is extremely difficult. It wasn't, I swore at glasses for 2 days because I couldn't get the etching to do what I needed it to do. So that even though I'm learning a new thing, and for a captain they're learning something brand new, it's not that I don't love change, I absolutely do, but I do think it's exhausting for me to think about it. When you think about like if you move somewhere new, like to pack all of your boxes and do all the things, you know why you're doing it and it's for the better of everything. But the process of it, there's no going around it. It's stressful and it's hard. And for me, when he's talking about you got to think about the future, I think of smart stock because it's something that everybody in our department just wants to throw out the window, myself included. Like it's difficult, but you know, it's not where some of the stuff just takes a ridiculously long time. And I think that's why I'm still so for smart stock, because I think there's qualities in it that it would be a really terrible idea, just like television, if we just threw it away because we didn't understand it. Like, I think we have to figure out what works for it and then move forward with it. And that's the part. It's not that I don't think more people aren't willing to change. I think they know they have to in today's world. I think it's more the frustrating part of the process of it. We've had smart stock for how long now, and it still sucks. It's just going through that, knowing you have to accept the stress along with it, when sometimes I just don't think I'm going to accept the stress. Anyways, I'm philosophical today, apparently. The one quote that I did that stood out to me, think beyond your lifetime if you want to accomplish something truly worthwhile. I don't think I ever think like that. Think past me. I think typically, you know, I'll think about like what I want in 5 years is a typical question that you're asked, and I think about what I want in the future for sure, but I never think about what happens in 100 years after I'm gone. And I think that's such much bigger thinking, and I think that's a lot of what the Black Lives Matter movement and everything all of that is about right now. So it's an interesting quote because I think it is very difficult for a lot of people to think past themselves in this moment rather than thinking about the greater good of what comes in generations from now because we fought for something today or we tried to do something else today. So just that apparently I'm deep thinking today, but
No, yeah, I mean, that's a question we all ask ourselves, right? About what will you be remembered for? What's your legacy? I don't think I ever have that thought either, like on a day-to-day basis. But maybe I should more. I guess I'd be more like Walt, maybe.
Well, I think that's the one thing that I can truly say I am not like Walt in at all, that I just don't think past my own lifetime. And I think his mindset was solely in that. Like he lived in the future. It reminds me a little bit, I don't if all of you watched Hamilton or not, but it's Alexander Hamilton of like what he's talking about, like he's writing, like he's running out of time. I think it's a similar quality. Like I need to finish it now because he could see so much more that was happening in the world. And that it's definitely something I want to strive to learn to do, because that to me is such a concept that I don't really ever put myself in very often.
One of you guys talked about it, like Walt not being a great artist or whatever, but I love that he wants to teach storytelling at Cal Arts. He's like, I'll teach storytelling. And I just wish I'd gotten a hold of that class. That would have been an amazing class, seriously. Also the space series, I don't know if we touched on that, but Von Braun and the space series helped influence the space race in the United States. And I don't know, he just has such a storytelling ability and the ability to know like what the pulse of something is before the pulse is even the thing. Like he brings things to life before they're even a thing. And I wish we had more leaders like him. He's a great guy. Another great series of chapters.
We also didn't mention how it was the Imagineers that invented the storyboard. I was under the assumption that it was just, a movie thing. Like it's always been part of pre-production in filmmaking, that the storyboard is the first step. And I thought that was like a role that was created when the movie industry was created, but it was the Imagineers. So
I also like how he came across it, because he's like, what are you doing with all this crap on the floor? Yeah. Like he was like mad about it. And then
now you're putting too many holes on my walls. Oh, fine, let me put a corkboard there.
Like, we'll only use that. It's like it goes from what's this crap on the floor to like, okay, let's storyboard the hell out of this thing. And I'm like, yeah, he was good, but see, like he could take other people's ideas. Like that's such a great thing. I wish I was as good at that as he is, but I thought that was used forever. I thought that was just like movie making 101.
Yeah, honestly, exactly. Even in my film classes, we never learned that. Like that was just, this is how you do it. Like you start with the storyboard and then okay.
Wasn't that guy like an engineer though, or something like that? Like he was like not a true artist.
Well, that would make sense, because it means that he can't visualize what the others could visualize. So he needed to physically like see it in person. But interesting.
I could just see like an engineer doing something like that, like putting.
Yeah.
I have to map it out. Like, yeah, such a good job.